She lost her job standing up for an Apache horse. 1 hour later, riders filled the town. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's incredible tale. Meet Sarah, a young woman who worked tirelessly at a ranch in Arizona, where the sun blazed hot and the desert stretched for miles. She was a simple woman, known for her kindness and dedication. Sarah's job was to care for the animals, but there was one animal that stood out, an Apache horse named Thunder. Thunder wasn't just any horse. He was a majestic creature with a deep, almost spiritual connection to the Apache people. Sarah had always admired Thunder's beauty and strength, and it was her duty to make sure he was well taken care of. Little did she know, standing up for him would change her life forever. One hot afternoon, the ranch owner, Mr. Jenkins, ordered Sarah to sell Thunder. He had received a lucrative offer from a wealthy businessman who wanted the horse for his private collection. But Sarah refused. She knew the horse wasn't just a commodity to be traded. Thunder was a symbol of Apache culture, and selling him would be a betrayal of something much bigger than herself. Sarah's defiance angered Mr. Jenkins. In a fury, he fired her on the spot, shouting that she was nothing but a fool for caring so much about a horse. With a heavy heart, Sarah packed her belongings and left the ranch. She had no idea what would happen next, but she was determined to do what she believed was right. She walked down the dusty road, the Arizona heat pressing down on her shoulders. What she didn't know was that her act of standing up for Thunder was about to set in motion a chain of events that would make her a hero. Within an hour, the quiet town of Redstone, usually peaceful and still, began to change. Far off in the distance, a dust cloud began to form, a sign of approaching riders. At first, it seemed like just another group of travelers passing through. But as the riders drew closer, Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She recognized them immediately. Apache warriors, their faces painted in the traditional markings of their tribe. The riders weren't here for a casual visit. They had come for Thunder. Sarah stood frozen, unsure of what to do. She had no idea how these warriors knew about her act of defiance, but she knew they would demand justice. With every passing second, the riders grew closer, their horses thundering across the desert. In just 1 hour, Sarah's simple act of kindness had attracted the attention of the Apache people, and the town was about to experience a spectacle unlike anything it had ever seen. As the Apache riders continued to approach, the heat of the day seemed to grow even more intense. Sarah's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea what these warriors wanted, but she had a sinking feeling that it was far from good. The town of Redstone, usually so quiet, now felt like it was on the verge of something monumental. The riders weren't just passing through. They were headed straight for the center of town, and every step they took seemed to echo through the dusty streets. Sarah stood at the edge of town, still in shock from her dismissal. Her eyes followed the riders, and she saw them slow down as they neared the entrance to the town. They didn't stop, though. The leader, a tall and imposing figure with sharp eyes and a stern face, continued to lead the group forward, his gaze fixed on something ahead. Sarah took a deep breath. She had to do something. She couldn't just let them march in and take Thunder away without saying a word. Without thinking, she stepped forward, trying to find the courage she had lost when Mr. Jenkins fired her. As the riders passed her, the leader suddenly raised his hand. The others came to a halt, their horses kicking up small clouds of dust around them. The silence in the air was thick, almost suffocating. Sarah swallowed hard as the leader turned his gaze toward her. For a moment, everything seemed to stand still. "You are the one who stood up for Thunder, yes?" His voice was deep and calm, but there was an undeniable weight to his words. Sarah nodded, unsure of what to say. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. "You did not sell him?" the leader asked again, his eyes scanning her face as if searching for the truth. Sarah felt her heart race. "No," she finally managed to say, her voice steady despite the overwhelming anxiety she felt. "I couldn't. He's not just a horse. He's part of something bigger, something sacred to your people." The leader nodded, as if he understood, but there was no sign of relief on his face. You understand the importance of this animal to us, then, he said, his tone almost respectful. You did well. Sarah was taken aback by his words. She had expected anger, or perhaps violence, but instead, she was met with something far more unexpected, respect. As the leader dismounted, his warriors followed suit, surrounding her in a protective circle. They weren't here to cause harm, at least not yet. The leader spoke again, this time more gently. You may have lost your job, but you have earned something far more valuable in the eyes of our people. Sarah looked up at him, her confusion growing. What do you mean? The leader extended his hand, and she hesitated for a moment before accepting it. His grip was firm but not threatening. We will honor you for your bravery, and we will make sure you are not alone in this. Your actions have not gone unnoticed, he explained. Sarah didn't know how to respond. She had expected to lose everything, but now, standing before these riders, it seemed as though she might have gained something even more powerful than a job. The leader turned to his warriors, giving them a signal. They moved in unison, dismounting and setting up camp just outside of town. Sarah watched in awe as they worked together with precision, their movements graceful and deliberate. The entire town had come to a standstill, as if waiting for something to happen. Soon, the leader returned to Sarah. You are welcome to join us, he said simply. We will keep you safe, and we will make sure Thunder stays where he belongs. Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. Was this really happening? Just an hour ago, she had lost everything, and now she was being offered protection by Apache warriors. As she looked around, she realized that her act of kindness had not only spared Thunder's life, but had also brought a group of people together who respected her for doing what she thought was right. The rider's presence in the town was a sign that things were about to change. What Sarah didn't know was that this was only the beginning of a much larger journey. The Apache people had long memories, and their gratitude ran deep. Sarah's decision to protect Thunder would shape her future in ways she never could have imagined. The Apache leader's words echoed in Sarah's mind as the campfire flickered in front of her. She had come to terms with losing her job, but the way everything had unfolded felt like a strange dream. Just an hour ago, she was standing alone, helpless and uncertain, now surrounded by Apache warriors who respected her for standing up for what was right. She sat quietly by the fire, still processing what had happened, when the leader, whose name she learned was Dakota, approached her again. The time has come for us to speak more openly, Dakota said, sitting across from her, his eyes reflecting the flames. You have shown courage, but we must also understand the bond between you and Thunder. Sarah nodded, still unsure of the significance of her actions. I only did what anyone would have done. I couldn't let him be sold. Not to someone who would treat him as just another piece of property. Dakota smiled slightly, as if Sarah's answer had pleased him. It is not just anyone who acts as you did. Most would have remained silent, especially when it meant risking their livelihood. You showed us strength, and that strength is why we are here now. We protect our own, and you, Sarah, are now one of ours. Sarah felt a rush of gratitude, but also confusion. She had only wanted to do what was right. Why was it so significant? Dakota leaned forward, his voice lowering. You saved Thunder, but more importantly, you stood up to an injustice. That is why our people are here. To offer you more than just protection. We owe you a debt now. The weight of his words settled in her chest. Sarah had always been taught to never expect anything in return for doing what was right. But here, in the presence of these Apache warriors, she could see the sincerity in Dakota's eyes. It wasn't just about Thunder. It was about something deeper, honor, respect, and a bond that crossed boundaries she hadn't realized existed. What do you mean? You owe me a debt, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dakota's gaze softened. You may have lost your job, but you have earned a place with us. Thunder's life is part of something much larger than either of us could have imagined. His bloodline carries the stories of our ancestors. By protecting him, you've connected yourself to those stories. And as our ancestors would have, we honor those who protect what is sacred to us. Sarah sat in stunned silence. She had no idea what she had just become a part of. Dakota continued. We are not here to take Thunder. We are here to ensure that he remains where he belongs. With you, and with us. Sarah's mind raced. She had heard whispers of the Apache people's strength and their deep connection to the land and the animals that roamed it. But she had never imagined that standing up for a horse would place her in the center of such a powerful bond. The warriors around the fire sat in still silence, waiting. They had not come to threaten her or demand anything from her, but to honor her decision. Takota's words resonated deeply with Sarah. She had never expected such a response, let alone the full support of a tribe of Apache warriors. She had thought she was merely protecting a horse, but now, she realized that in her actions, she had become part of something far greater. Takota stood up and motioned for Sarah to follow him. As she did, she noticed that the other riders were setting up a more permanent camp just outside the town. They weren't just here to pass through. They were here to stay, at least for a while. Sarah's thoughts were interrupted as Takota led her toward the center of the camp. "You will stay here tonight," he said, "and tomorrow we will speak with your people. We will make sure thunder is not sold and that your actions are honored." The following morning, Sarah awoke to the sound of hooves. When she emerged from her tent, she saw the Apache warriors preparing to leave. But this time, they weren't riding alone. There were other townsfolk gathered, including the local sheriff and some of the ranch hands, who had come to witness the Apache's presence in Redstone. As Takoto approached, he nodded at Sarah, signaling her to join him. "We speak now, for thunder and for what is just," he said, his voice steady but firm. Sarah walked beside him, her mind still reeling, but her heart filled with a sense of purpose. The moment had come for the truth to be told and for justice to be served. The morning sun had barely risen over Redstone when Sarah and Takota, along with the Apache riders, approached the town center. The townsfolk had gathered, curious and apprehensive about the presence of the Apache warriors, their horses lined up in perfect formation. Sarah could feel the tension in the air, but she also felt a strange sense of calm. Takota's presence beside her was reassuring. His stoic expression hinted at a deeper resolve than she could comprehend. They walked toward the center of the square, where the sheriff, Mr. Jenkins, and several ranch hands awaited them. Sarah's heart pounded as she saw the familiar faces, now nervous in the face of the unexpected situation. Mr. Jenkins, standing near the center, shifted uneasily when he saw the warriors. The air was thick with uncertainty. Takota stepped forward first, his posture commanding respect. The warriors behind him stood tall and still, like statues, their faces solemn but resolute. Sarah stood beside Takota, her presence a symbol of the unity between the Apache people and herself, something she never expected to become a part of. Takota's voice broke the silence, firm and clear. "We have come to speak of what is right. We are not here for violence, but to honor a debt owed to this woman for her actions in protecting thunder. She has shown great courage, and that is a virtue we respect. Now, we demand that this town do the same." The sheriff looked uncomfortable, his fingers twitching near his gun belt, but he held his ground. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this is a town of laws. We don't just hand over our animals to anyone, let alone let some Apache warriors walk in here and demand anything." Takota's gaze sharpened, his tone unwavering. "This is not a demand. This is justice. Thunder is not just an animal. He is a symbol of a deeper bond, one that has been ignored for far too long. Sarah has acted in good faith, and it is only right that she is honored for that." Sarah felt the weight of his words. She never thought her simple decision to protect a horse would bring about such an intense confrontation, but here it was. The townsfolk had gathered, whispering among themselves, many of them looking to Mr. Jenkins for leadership, but the ranch owner remained silent. Takota continued, his voice strong enough to cut through the murmurs. "We do not come as enemies, but as allies, and we do not ask for anything other than what is right. We ask that you cease any attempt to sell thunder and that Sarah's actions be acknowledged, for she has done what most would not have done." The silence in the square stretched on, thick with the weight of history and the unfamiliar reality of the moment. The sheriff stepped forward cautiously, his eyes meeting Sarah's. "I don't know about honoring her actions," he muttered, his voice betraying his unease. "But I know one thing. We've had enough trouble in this town, and I don't want any more." The tension in the air was palpable, but before anyone could speak, Sarah found her voice. She stepped forward, her eyes locked on Mr. Jenkins, who was still silent. "You can't sell thunder," she said firmly, her voice carrying across the square. "He's not just a horse to be traded. He's a living symbol of a culture and a history. I couldn't let you sell him, no matter the cost. And now, I don't expect anything from you. But I do expect that you respect my decision. The townsfolk shifted, some nodding, others exchanging uncertain glances. Mr. Jenkins looked from Sarah to Dakota and back, his eyes narrowing as if weighing his options. Fine, he said finally, his voice low. You've made your point. But I'm not happy about this. I'll take a loss, but this isn't over. Dakota nodded once, his expression unreadable. This is not about winning or losing. This is about respect and doing what is right. We will leave this town in peace. But know that the Apache people will always remember those who show honor. With that, Dakota motioned to his warriors. They turned in unison, their horses moving silently as they began to leave the square. The townsfolk watched in awe as the Apache riders filed out, their presence leaving a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed it. Sarah felt a sense of relief, but also a deep sense of change. She had not only protected a horse, she had stood up for something much bigger, something that would ripple through the town for years to come. As she turned to leave with Dakota, she noticed the sheriff looking at her, his expression softer than before. For the first time, he nodded at her, a silent acknowledgement of her courage. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As Sarah walked away, the weight of the moment settled in. She had done something she never thought possible, and in return, she had gained more than she ever expected: respect, honor, and a connection to a history that would shape her future. As the days passed, the tension in Redstone began to settle, but the events of that morning lingered in the air. Sarah had become a figure of curiosity, respect, and even disbelief. The Apache warriors had left, but their presence was still felt in every corner of the town. The sheriff's subtle nod had meant more than Sarah expected, and the people of Redstone were beginning to view her differently. They no longer saw her as just a young woman working at the ranch, but as someone who had stood up for something greater than herself. Dakota had promised that the Apache people would not forget the honor she had shown. True to his word, word of Sarah's actions spread beyond Redstone. Within days, travelers and settlers from neighboring towns arrived, eager to hear the tale of the woman who had saved Thunder. Some came out of genuine respect, while others were merely curious, but all were impressed by her bravery. Sarah had become a symbol, not just of courage, but of the power of standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. One evening, just as the sun was setting behind the mountains, Dakota returned. This time, he was not alone. With him were several other Apache warriors, including a man Sarah had not met before. He was older, with a strong, weathered face and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of years of experience. Dakota introduced him as Chief Hawk, the leader of a neighboring Apache tribe. Chief, Hawk has heard of your actions, Sarah, Dakota said, his voice carrying a note of pride. He has come to offer his thanks. Sarah stood in awe, unsure of what to say. She had not expected this level of recognition. It is I who should thank you, she replied, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. I only did what I felt was right. I couldn't let Thunder be sold. Chief Hawk stepped forward, his gaze steady and filled with respect. You have earned more than thanks. You have earned a place among us. His words were simple, but they carried a deep meaning. Sarah's heart swelled with emotion, but she remained quiet, unsure of how to process the offer. She had never imagined that standing up for a horse would lead to this acceptance by a group of people who had lived through so much struggle. Chief Hawk continued, We, the Apache people, honor those who stand for what is right, and we remember them. Your actions have strengthened the bond between our people and the settlers here. You have proven that we can work together, not as enemies, but as allies. Dakota nodded in agreement. This is not just about a horse. This is about understanding, respect, and the strength of unity. You have shown that we can protect what is sacred, no matter the cost. Sarah felt a lump in her throat. She had never expected anything like this. She had acted out of instinct. But now, standing before the chief and his warriors, she realized that her actions had set something much larger into motion. I never wanted anything in return, Sarah said softly. I just wanted to do the right thing. Thunder is important, not just as an animal, but as a symbol of something much bigger. Chief Hawk smiled, a rare expression on his face. That is why we honor you, Sarah. You understand the importance of standing up for what is right, even when the world seems against you. And for that, we offer you our protection and our respect. The next few days were a blur for Sarah. The town of Redstone had changed in the wake of the Apache warriors' visit. The once divided community began to show signs of unity. People who had once been fearful of the Apache now spoke with respect, and even Mr. Jenkins, though begrudgingly, seemed to recognize the significance of Sarah's actions. The town was not without its challenges, but Sarah felt a sense of peace she had never experienced before. Her bond with Thunder had grown stronger, and with the support of Dakota and Chief Hawk, she felt more certain of her place in this world. As the seasons passed, Sarah became a quiet leader in the town. She was never one for grand speeches, but her actions spoke louder than words ever could. She continued to care for Thunder and the other animals, but now, she also worked with the Apache people to help bridge the gap between their cultures. Together, they built something lasting, a connection between two worlds that had once been divided by fear and misunderstanding. And as for Thunder, he was no longer just a horse. He was a symbol of everything Sarah had fought for: honor, courage, and the strength to stand up for what was right. His presence in Redstone, protected and revered, was a constant reminder of the day when a simple act of kindness had changed everything. As the weeks passed, Sarah's life in Redstone slowly transformed. She had become an integral part of the community, not just for her work with the animals, but for her role in bridging the gap between the settlers and the Apache people. The town, once divided by fear and misunderstandings, was now a place where cultures met and slowly began to coexist. Sarah had done what she never thought possible. She had united people who had been enemies for generations. But even as peace settled over Redstone, there were still those who resisted the change. Some of the ranchers, particularly Mr. Jenkins, were still wary of the Apache presence. He would never openly admit it, but his actions made it clear. He had been forced to acknowledge Sarah's influence, but his attitude had not changed. He had reluctantly agreed to keep Thunder, but that didn't mean he was happy about it. One afternoon, as Sarah was walking through the town, she overheard a conversation between two ranchers at the local general store. "I can't believe we let the Apache stay here like this," one of them muttered, looking nervously over his shoulder. "They're not to be trusted. We've got to do something before they get too comfortable." Sarah's heart sank. It was one thing to see the open distrust, but hearing it spoken aloud made it feel all the more real. She had hoped that things had truly changed, but the reality of the situation was far more complicated. That evening, as the sun began to set, Sarah sat down with Dakota at the edge of the Apache camp. He could see the concern on her face. "What's troubling you, Sarah?" he asked, his voice soft but knowing. "I overheard some of the ranchers today," Sarah said, her voice tinged with frustration. "They still don't trust you. They think the Apache shouldn't be here, that you're all just waiting to take over." Dakota looked at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a deep sigh, he nodded. "I know that some of them are still fearful. Change is never easy, especially when it challenges their way of life. But we cannot control how they think, only how we act." He paused for a moment before continuing. "You have already shown them what we are capable of, what we stand for. It is up to them to decide whether they accept that or not. We cannot force understanding, only offer it." Sarah looked at him, grateful for his wisdom. She had never been one for conflict, but this situation felt like a battle she couldn't ignore. "But what if they never accept us? What if things get worse?" Dakota smiled, though it was a small, knowing smile. "Things may get worse before they get better, but that is the way of the world. You cannot change everything in one day, Sarah. You have already done more than most could ever dream of." As the weeks turned into months, Sarah continued to work with the Apache people, helping to mediate between them and the settlers. Slowly but surely, her efforts began to bear fruit. Some of the ranchers, including a few who had been outspoken in their opposition, began to soften. They saw that the Apache people were not here to conquer, but to coexist. They worked together to tend to the land, to protect the animals, and to build a community based on mutual respect. Mr. Jenkins, though still distant, began to realize that he could no longer ignore the shift that was taking place in Redstone. One morning, he approached Sarah at the local stable, where she was tending to Thunder. "Sarah," he said gruffly, "I've been thinking about things." She looked up from the horse, surprised to hear him speak so civilly. "What do you mean?" "About Thunder," he continued, his voice quieter now. "I never understood why you fought so hard to keep him, but I'm starting to see why it matters. I've been wrong. Sarah was taken aback. She had never expected an apology from Mr. Jenkins, let alone this kind of acknowledgement. You're saying you understand now? She asked, still unsure if she was hearing him correctly. Mr. Jenkins nodded, though his face remained stern. I don't like change, but I see that what you did wasn't just about a horse. It was about standing up for something bigger. And that's something I can respect. Sarah's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and hope. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a step forward, a sign that things were changing. As time went on, Sarah's efforts continued to bridge the divide between the Apache and the settlers. The town of Redstone became a symbol of cooperation, a place where different cultures could work together toward a common goal. Sarah had never set out to become a leader, but in her quiet, steadfast way, she had led the charge toward a future where respect and understanding were the foundations of a stronger community. Thunder, once a symbol of division, had become a symbol of unity. And as Sarah stood beside him, watching the sun set over the horizon, she realized that she had done more than just save a horse. She had helped save a community. As the seasons passed, the town of Redstone continued to change, its transformation slow but steady. Sarah, who had once only hoped to make a small difference, now found herself at the center of a larger movement, one that was redefining how the town viewed its relationship with the Apache people. It wasn't just the Apache tribe that had started to integrate with the settlers. More and more ranchers, who had once viewed them with suspicion, began to see the benefits of their cooperation. There were challenges, of course. Old prejudices die hard, but Sarah's actions had shown that bridging the gap was possible. And yet, despite the progress, there were still moments of tension. One afternoon, as Sarah walked through the town, she overheard a heated discussion between some of the local ranchers. I don't care what they say, one of them grumbled. The Apache will always be a threat. We've got to be ready. If they get too comfortable, they'll take everything we've worked for. Sarah paused, her heart sinking. She had heard these words before, but now, hearing them out in the open, it felt different. It wasn't just a few isolated voices anymore. It was a sentiment that was growing among the settlers. The fear of change, the fear of the unknown, was still there, simmering beneath the surface. She knew she couldn't ignore it. If they didn't address this fear head-on, it could undo all the work they had done. That night, Sarah sat by the fire with Dakota, reflecting on the conversation. Dakota had become not just a protector of the land, but a trusted friend. There are still many in the town who fear us, Dakota said, breaking the silence. They don't understand what we are trying to build. Sarah nodded, staring into the flames. I overheard some of the ranchers today. They still think we're a threat. That will take over. Dakota's face was calm, but his eyes darkened slightly. Fear is a powerful thing, Sarah. It clouds judgment and keeps people from seeing what is possible. It's not the Apache who are the threat. It's the fear that lies within the hearts of those who cannot imagine a world where we work together. Sarah sighed, feeling the weight of the situation. What do we do? Dakota looked at her, his gaze steady. We continue to show them that cooperation is possible. We keep working with them. We keep standing by our word, showing them that we are not enemies, but allies. Over time, they will see the truth. But it will take patience. Sarah wasn't sure how much longer she could keep being patient. The fear and distrust from some of the ranchers were growing, and the pressure was starting to build. She had worked so hard to create something meaningful, but now, it felt like it was all hanging by a thread. The next day, the tension that had been brewing finally came to a head. A group of ranchers, led by Mr. Jenkins, arrived at the Apache camp, their faces grim. Dakota was the first to step forward, his warriors forming a quiet, respectful line behind him. Mr. Jenkins didn't waste any time. We've had enough, he said, his voice tense. The Apache need to leave Redstone. You've overstayed your welcome. Sarah's heart raced as she stepped forward, instinctively standing beside Dakota. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice shaky. You've made things worse. We've tried, but you've done nothing but stir up fear and suspicion among the townsfolk. If we let you stay any longer, there's no telling what will happen. Dakota stood tall, his expression unwavering. You do not speak for all the people of Redstone, he said quietly. Some fear us, but others stand with us. We will not leave. This land belongs to all who respect it. Mr. Jenkins' face reddened. You're just causing trouble. This is our town, our land. We've worked for it for years. We're not going to just let you take over. Sarah took a deep breath. This was it. This was the moment she had feared, but also the one she had prepared for. She stepped forward, her voice strong. This isn't about taking over. It's about respecting each other. It's about finding a way to live together. We've made progress, but if you want to throw it all away because of fear, then you're no better than the people who first came here to take from the land. The silence that followed was thick. The ranchers seemed unsure of what to do, and Mr. Jenkins stood frozen, unable to respond. It wasn't until one of the ranch hands, a man named Bill, spoke up. I've seen the changes. Things are different. We've been working together with the Apache. It's not easy, but it's better than fighting. Maybe we should give them a chance. Slowly, others began to speak up, voicing their support for Sarah and the Apache people. The tension began to dissolve, though the atmosphere remained heavy. Dakota nodded, acknowledging Bill's words. It is not easy, but it is worth it, he said. The group of ranchers, though still divided, slowly backed down. They had not won, but neither had Dakota and Sarah. It was a victory of understanding, one that had been earned through hard work and patience. As the sun set that evening, Sarah stood beside Dakota, feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment. They had faced the storm, and together, they had weathered it. There would still be challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt hopeful. Change was slow, but it was happening. And for the first time, it seemed like the town of Redstone might be on the verge of something truly beautiful. Months passed, and the tension in Redstone continued to ease, but the work was far from over. Sarah and Dakota, alongside their new allies in the town, had built a fragile peace, but the true test was always going to be sustaining it. The relationship between the Apache people and the settlers was still in its infancy, and while there was progress, old habits and fears were hard to break. Sarah continued to work tirelessly, bridging gaps wherever she could. She worked on the ranch, took care of Thunder, and spent time with the Apache, learning their ways, their culture, and their traditions. Every day felt like a new challenge, but it also felt like a new opportunity. As the seasons shifted, Sarah saw something incredible happening in Redstone. What had once been a town divided by fear and prejudice was now slowly becoming a model of cooperation. The Apache warriors, once feared as outsiders, were now trusted partners. The ranchers who had once been her fiercest critics were now learning to work with the Apache to maintain the land, care for the animals, and even share knowledge. It was a subtle transformation, but one that Sarah could feel every time she walked through the town square. One morning, just as the sun rose over the horizon, Sarah was in the barn when she heard the sound of approaching hooves. It wasn't just the familiar sound of the local settlers or even the Apache warriors. This time, it was something different. She stepped out of the barn to see a group of riders on the horizon, riding fast. As they drew closer, she recognized them, men from a neighboring town, and they did not look friendly. The leader of the group, a tall man with a hard face, rode up to Sarah and Dakota, who had been standing nearby. He didn't even greet them. Instead, he went straight to the point. "We've had enough of this peace nonsense," he said, his voice harsh. "You've got Apache warriors living alongside you, working with you. This is our land. We don't want them here, and we won't stand for it." Sarah's heart raced. She had seen this coming, but she wasn't prepared for it. The hostility in the man's voice was undeniable. Dakota, however, remained calm, his expression unreadable. "You do not speak for all of Redstone," Dakota said evenly. "The people here have made their choice. We are here to stay." The leader sneered. "You think just because a few of them have changed their minds, the rest of us will? You're wrong. This land belongs to the settlers, and we won't let you take it." Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady despite the surge of fear inside her. "You don't have to agree with us. But what we've built here isn't just for the Apache or just for the settlers. It's for everyone who wants peace." The leader's eyes narrowed. "Peace? You think you can make peace with people who want to take what's ours?" Sarah shook her head. "I'm not asking for anything to be taken. We're asking for a chance to live side by side. The Apache aren't here to take from anyone. They're here to work with us." "Work with us?" the man spat. "They've already started taking over. We won't stand for it." The group of riders behind him seemed ready to act, but Sarah could see that they were unsure. The power in Dakota's calm demeanor was clear. He wasn't just standing up for himself. He was standing up for the Apache people and everything they had fought for. We are not here to take anything from you, Takoda said, his voice low and steady. We are here to build something better. You can choose to be a part of that, or you can continue to live in fear. But we will not be intimidated. For a moment, the tension in the air was unbearable. The men from the neighboring town seemed to hesitate, unsure of how to respond. Finally, the leader's face twisted with frustration. This isn't over, he said. We'll be back. With that, he turned his horse around and signaled for the others to follow. As they rode off, Sarah felt the weight of the moment sink in. This was far from over. But Takoda's presence beside her gave her hope. He had stood firm, and so had she. It's not over yet, Sarah said quietly. No, Takoda agreed. But we will be ready. As the day went on, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the peace they had worked so hard for was fragile. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but she also knew that she couldn't give up. She had already seen what was possible when people stood together, and she was determined to make sure Redstone remained a place where people, Apache and settlers alike, could live side by side in peace. That night, as the stars filled the sky above the quiet town, Sarah stood on the porch of her cabin, gazing out at the land she had fought to protect. There was still so much work to be done, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a deep sense of purpose. Whatever came next, she knew she would face it with strength, courage, and the unshakable belief that peace, though difficult, was worth fighting for. Months later, the landscape of Redstone had changed in ways no one could have predicted. What had once been a town divided by fear and distrust now stood as a testament to the power of cooperation. The Apache warriors and settlers, who had once viewed each other as enemies, had come together, not out of obligation, but out of respect. The connection between them was no longer just about survival. It was about understanding, about building something stronger than any one person or group. Sarah, who had once stood alone in her belief that things could change, now found herself at the heart of a community that had transformed, a community that had learned to appreciate what it meant to live in harmony with one another. The Apache were no longer outsiders in Redstone. They had become part of the fabric of the town, working side by side with the settlers to maintain the land and care for the animals. It wasn't perfect. Old fears still lingered in some corners, but the progress they had made was undeniable. The most visible symbol of this change was Thunder, the Apache horse Sarah had fought to protect. He was no longer just a horse. He had become a symbol of everything that had been achieved, a living testament to the bonds that had been formed between the Apache and the settlers. Sarah had become a leader in her own right, not through titles or recognition, but through her actions. Her quiet determination had inspired others, and her willingness to stand up for what was right had shown the people of Redstone that change was possible. One evening, as the sun began to set, Sarah stood in the town square, watching the people go about their business. The square was quieter now, the usual tension replaced by a sense of calm. She had come a long way from the uncertain woman who had first arrived here, unsure of where her path would lead. She had found her place, not just in Redstone, but in the world. As she looked around, she saw familiar faces, ranchers who had once been her critics, now nodding in respect as they passed by. The town had grown, but more importantly, it had evolved. It wasn't just the settlers who had changed. The Apache had also found a place for themselves in this new world. Takoda, who had been her constant ally throughout this journey, approached her from behind. She didn't need to turn around to know it was him. She could feel his presence, steady and strong, just like always. You have done something incredible, Sarah, he said, his voice low but full of pride. She turned to face him, her eyes meeting his. We've done it together, Takoda, she replied, her voice filled with gratitude. Without you, none of this would have been possible. Takoda smiled, though it was a small, knowing smile. You did not need me to make the right choice. You had that strength within you from the beginning. Sarah felt a lump in her throat. She had always thought she was just a woman with a strong belief. But now, standing here with Takoda, she realized that her belief had sparked something much larger than she could have imagined. Together, they had created something that would last, something that would continue to grow long after they were gone. What comes next? Sarah asked, her gaze drifting back to the town. Takoda looked out at the horizon, his eyes reflecting the fading light of the sun. What comes next is more of this. More of understanding. More of peace. There will always be challenges, but you have shown that there is a way forward. A way for us all to live together. Sarah nodded. She knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be obstacles, both from outside forces and from within. But she also knew that the people of Redstone, both Apache and settler, had learned something invaluable. They had learned that change was possible. They had learned that peace, though hard-earned, was worth every ounce of effort. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, Sarah stood tall, her heart filled with hope for the future. The town of Redstone had been forged in the fires of conflict, but now, it stood as a beacon of hope, a place where understanding and respect were no longer just ideals, but realities. The Apache had found a home here, just as Sarah had, and together, they had built something lasting. They had shown that even in a world divided by fear and misunderstanding, there was always a chance for something better. And in that moment, Sarah knew that she had found her place in that future, a place where courage, respect, and unity would continue to guide the way. She looked at Takoto one last time, a smile on her face. "Thank you," she whispered. He simply nodded, his expression calm but filled with meaning. "You have already done more than enough." And with that, Sarah knew that the journey she had started so long ago, standing up for what was right, had led her to a place where, together, they had created a future worth fighting for.